collapsed.
He was making jokes earlier. We didn't listen.
No, I don't want to talk to him. Don't care if I never talk to the bastard.
Oh, he's still smiling.
Tell me who fed me.
Peden. He's a pimp.
How come the visual is a greyhound and the audio is
Police dropped the charge against him. I didn't proceed with the charge
1618?
against him for beating up a hooker just before they released the fattest person.
Why is he so into sending these things around?
Because he's got a source in the police department.
Yep.
Well, I know.
Good morning.
Too. Morning.
We have to hurry up with this, Jack, so I can get back to real work.
You son of a bitch. He didn't hear me, did he? That fat son of a bitch.
Didn't hear that, eh?
No. Yes, I heard it. Does he know we're doing an intro first? You have the feeling sometimes.
Question to Webster. Does this mean my tobacco is now tax deductible?
Yes. Yes. No, you can't see it. Watch the introduction. Watch the lead up there. You haven't seen the opening to the show, have you? Or you can watch it now.
Monday night, see The Turning Point, 9 o'clock.
September.
First time on television, right here on BCTV. Immediately following the sensational 70s, Part 2.
Webster is next on British Columbia Television.
Good morning, this beautiful, wet Friday morning in Vancouver. And today we're going to whip you around the country. We're going to talk to the Pipe in Victoria. We're going to talk to Christine Hearn in Ottawa. We're going to come back to the studio and we're going to meet Jim Patterson, the Rentalsman, about whom many people have many problems. And we're also going to talk to Ian Waddell, also known as Ian Waddell, Simma Holt's replacement in the House of Commons. Don't phone me, Simma. He's NDP Vancouver East. But first, after this break, we're going to Harvey Oberfeld, our man in Victoria. Simma. You always seem a Vancouver East person to me. I know. Smart asses always. Smart asses always make flubs. Hello, Harvey. He can't hear me. I hope he can hear me when we go on the air. This can be quite good fun, this business at times.
But other times it's really... What do you do when you're not feeling
Try that again,
Jack.
Try it again.
You got to come in and do it.
Speak to Harvey, Jack.
Hello, Harvey.
Hi, Jack.
Good.
Did you hear my question before?
No.
Does this mean that my pipe tobacco is now tax deductible?
The answer is yes.
Good, thank you.
And the BCTV won't pay for it. Webster Productions will.
Okay.
For that tobacco smoked on the set during the broadcast.
Just that one, eh? Doesn't matter what kind of tobacco it is?
As long as it's not that funny tobacco.
Takes all the fun out of it.
Harvey Oberfeld, former Vancouver Sun. Whose airline is going to be what way? I'm going straight to the camera. Good morning to my man in Victoria, Harvey Oberfeld. And first, Harvey, just to unsettle you, a personal note. A funny thing, I haven't had a single complaint or a call to the switchboard about the fact that you smoke on camera with that ugly and repulsive pipe. I put it down to the fact that pipes are respectable and acceptable, and cigarette smoking is repulsive. Would you agree?
Well, that's good because it saves me from having to cut a few of your telephone lines if that ever happened. But no, I think they realize it's just a stage prop, of course, and that it's part of me, and it calms me down. So it has a beneficial effect. That's why people don't object.
Let me put it this way. It's a small part of the large you.
Yes, and the large me is going to be getting smaller by spring. I give you that commitment.
Now, forget that kind of nonsense. Lenko is the latest executive assistant in the harried and harassed social credit government to bite the dust. Does this mean that poor George will now have to seek the lines of the unemployed at the local bureaus?
No, I don't think so. He doesn't seem to be too worried. In fact, I had a conversation with him yesterday, and here's a man who's going to be out of work within a week, and he's planning a nice holiday. He's going to relax a bit, and then he's going to do some traveling. And don't be surprised if you see him surface later on, perhaps at Richmond headquarters of Social Credit or some other constituency office. I think it's, although he calls it a resignation, to me it seems more like a transfer than an actual resignation.
You have a suspicious mind.
I certainly do.
Now, tell me though, George, now that George has gone, poor little George, is he the ultimate fall guy? Did he really bare his breasts and say, I am the kingpin of the stupidity initiated by the man who describes himself as old dumb Kelly?
Right. Well, I think the government would hope that we would think that he is the ultimate fall guy, that he was confessing to so many things yesterday as taking responsibility for every facet of the manual and the tapes just about that. I think yesterday in our interview with him, that had I posed the question, are you also responsible for Iran, what's going on in Iran? I think he would have, if he felt it would help the Socreds, I think he would have taken responsibility for that too. I think there's probably I'm sure he had a responsibility, but he's very enthusiastic now about taking total responsibility, and I think people in the government probably hope that that will satisfy the members of the media.
Now, going back to the very beginning, just to be introspective for a moment, if this had all happened at once, Kelly, presumably Mackay, and Lenko, wham, bam, when the Premier came back from Japan, would he have been off the hook?
Well, I think the whole government could have been off the hook a lot easier, because if Kelly had gone, if Mackay had gone, and if perhaps if Lenko took full responsibility, I think the inquisitiveness of the media would have been curtailed. But now, the more we look into it, the more we seem to be coming up with, and all kinds of new leads and little things here and there. I don't think it's going to stop now. I think people are going to continue to ask questions, and in fact, they're starting to ask more questions, and that's really got the government upset.
Just suddenly struck me, somebody from the moon or somebody from even Alberta might say, what are these two fellas talking about? We are, of course, talking about dirty tricks.
About the dirty tricks affair. And
what about Glenn Mitchell? Was not Glenn Mitchell kind of in there too?
Well, Glenn Mitchell was the head of the caucus research staff at the time that this happened, and he certainly has not really given all the answers to the satisfaction of some members of the media, but he poses a problem for the government because he has obtained the services of a lawyer. And just as when Alan Mackay did that, they seem to be a little more reluctant to deal with him than they certainly were with the George Lenkos of the world or the Jack Kellys of the world. So
Mitchell now is working for whom?
Mitchell is now executive assistant to the Honourable Pat McGeer, Education Minister. And yesterday, Mr. McGeer told reporters he had utmost confidence in Mr. Mitchell, but I think there are certainly more questions that will be asked about Mitchell's role, especially now that Lenko has stepped down.
Now, the Premier, is there really any fuss about where he is or why he is? Don't premiers normally go for little vacations in California? Certainly W.A.C. Bennett used to do that while he was planning his next Machiavellian strategy.
Well, they certainly take time off and they'll take holidays, but the one thing I've noticed about this occasion, nobody knows where he is. Now, either the people in his office know where he is, and they're lying to us when they say they don't know where he is, or they truly don't know where the Premier is. And anybody who's been in the United States vacationing, even 30 miles south, knows that you hear absolutely nothing about British Columbia or almost nothing about Canada. So here we have a Premier who's allegedly or supposedly incognito. Nobody knows, he doesn't know what's going on in BC unless he's phoning in on a fairly regular basis, and nobody can contact him in an emergency.
And yeah, they know where he is. Don't
well, they say they don't. So if they say they don't and they do know where he is, that indicates certain untruthfulness, let's put it that way.
Okay, he's planning a cabinet change. We had a little snap at that last week. What does your crystal ball tell you about the cabinet changes? Because they must come soon, because he's got to call the legislature sometime before March.
Well, he'll be back on Wednesday, and he'll probably make his decision while he's away. He'll either announce them next Thursday or Friday. And I think we can watch some changes. You might see education, science, and technology broken down into 2 ministries. You might see a special Ministry of Intergovernmental Affairs created, something we do not now have. And it'll be interesting to see how he reacts to the current Dirty Tricks affair when he changes the cabinet. And people are wondering just what that's going to look like.
Grace has been looking dreadful this week, you know, not her usual cool, calm, collected self. She's almost bound to be shuffled, isn't she?
Well, she's bound to be shuffled. I've heard suggestions she might be shuffled right to the back bench. I don't know. I have my doubts.
Don't say that. No.
I don't think so. I don't think Bennett has I don't think he feels he should do that, and I don't think he would have the guts. So I think
he couldn't possibly do that, Harvey, because she is the power behind the throne, behind the party, behind the membership, behind the organization.
Yes, but you have to remember that he did consolidate his power considerably at the convention that was just held. But I don't think he'll drop her from the cabinet. But I think if certainly with her executive assistant Lenko now resigning, and there might be some pressure on her, she's still under pressure. But I don't think Bennett himself would unilaterally drop her from the cabinet.
Personal question: is he going to give us a new Attorney General?
I don't know if he will. He certainly could, because I know that the word I get is that Gardy Gardam really wants to be made a judge and be done with politics.
No way.
He says he's happy in the job, but...
I do not see the Conservative government suggesting for approval Gardy Gardam as the Supreme Court judge. Magnificent judge he might make.
Watch what happens to Alan Williams. See if Alan Williams gets a move.
Alan must be very unhappy these days. Must be. Haven't spoken to him, mind you. Harvey, I'm grateful. Who's on Capital Comment this week?
On Capital Coma this week we have Jim Hewitt, the Energy Minister, and we have to remember he's the fellow who just said recently that it actually costs cheaper today to buy gasoline than it did 10 years ago. And we'll be asking him to explain that a little more fully.
My thanks to my man in Victoria, our man in Victoria, Harvey Oberfeld. Thanks, Harvey.
You're
I'll
welcome.
be back from Ottawa, with Ottawa, Christine Hearn, after this break. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Jack. How are you?
Listen, we had great fun last week. Let's do it again this week. But you let me down. You said that Trudeau had a very bad cold and all the kids had very bad colds.
Well,
what went wrong with your information?
There was nothing wrong with my information. Trudeau did have a very bad cold, but the word is that he made a miraculous recovery. Sometime late Friday afternoon, he just suddenly got all better and whisked off to New York.
With the disco?
With the disco.
What was the lady's name?
The lady's name was Linda.
She almost came up, to use the expression, she almost came up on the floor of the House of Commons.
Yes, she did. John Crosbie, the finance minister, who's known as a bit of a practical joker, he's had to keep it under restraint a bit now that he's a cabinet minister, had intended to wear the picture of Trudeau and Linda on his tie. He was going to hold his coat in such a way that the speaker wouldn't be able to see what was going on, so wouldn't be able to chastise him. But he was going to hold it so that all the television cameras in the country would be able to have this shot of Trudeau with Linda.
But didn't come up. Did he chicken out?
No, he didn't chicken out, but soberer heads in the Conservative caucus persuaded him that this would perhaps not be fitting behavior for a finance minister.
Fair enough, but you know, a few nosies were out of joint here, Ray, on the question of the Liberal meeting here in British Columbia, and they were told that he wasn't coming because he had a bad cold.
Yes. Art Phillips was very, very unhappy about that. He came back to Ottawa and spoke freely to any reporter that asked him to say how disappointed he was, how angry, in fact, he was that he'd been misled.
Maybe Trudeau has got a subconscious death wish as leader of the Liberal Party. What do you hear about that around Ottawa?
He's either got a subconscious death wish or he's decided that there aren't enough Liberals in British Columbia to worry about.
Well, of course, one thing leads to another. What about all this money he spent on his furnishings? Did he overdo it? I've read some pieces in the paper. Was he lavish? Was he swimming pool lavish? Or is one nitpicking if one says, how much was it he spent? Was too much?
It was, just a minute here, it was $86,703 to redo his offices. Now, mind you, he has quite a considerable number of rooms in that office complex. But some of the items do seem a bit outrageous. There was the $1,020 for 12 lampshades, 12 lamps and shades. $6,066 for 18 chairs. $9,870 for carpets, $593 to recut the marble in his private washroom.
To recut the what?
The marble.
Oh.
Marble washrooms. $840 to install backing on the fabric, which was to go up in the private washroom, and $62 for a marble soap dish, no doubt to match the marble that had just been recut.
Listen, Joe has inherited all of this, is that correct?
Yes, he has.
And there's no need for any further changes in anything, I presume?
Well, one would assume not after all that.
Yeah, Joe hasn't been spending any money on it since he went in. He spent money on Sussex Drive, though, didn't he?
Yes, we don't quite know what's been done inside Sussex Drive, but there were considerable renovations to prepare the place for him, just as there were renovations at Stornoway to prepare the place for Trudeau.
Now, Joe Clark is getting a much better press now. He always appears dignified. He doesn't stumble or fall or do anything like that. But you were at the Energy Conference, the little round table caper. How did he look?
He looked all right. He appeared conciliatory and trying very hard to do his best. The whole thing was just phony anyway. Whenever they have these open meetings, all it is a bunch of political posturing. Everybody sits around and delivers their papers and looks wise and nods at the right time.
What about our Bill Bennett? How did our Bill Bennett look at it?
Not very good. Our Bill Bennett basically came and presented the same position papers that he's presented at every conference, whether it's constitutional, energy, or economic, since he became Premier. He talked about things like how we ought to use hog fuel to conserve energy. He talked about the Pacific Rim. He talked about how British Columbia has to get what it can from central Canada.
He didn't come up with any specific thing except to sweep up the bits of firewood and use them for conservation of energy.
Exactly. He came up with nothing specific and nothing new. It's all a recycling of what he's been doing for years.
Who had the biggest and best energy-wasting limousine at the conference?
Bill Bennett had the biggest and best energy-wasting limousine by far. It was a white Cadillac, the biggest limousine that Cadillac makes. It was as long as a whale.
Pity he hadn't used the Volkswagen.
Well, it would have been a nice touch. It would have been a nice touch if any of them had used an ordinary car.
They won't do that. Now, you pick up rumours on the East Coast, or should I say in central Canada, in Ottawa, our nation's capital, which sometimes we don't get on the West Coast. You have two up your sleeve in Ottawa, Chris.
That's right. The latest rumour, which I hear from liberals here in Ottawa, concerns one Paul Manning, Commissioner of Stadiums. And the latest rumor in Ottawa is that there's some talk that they'll have Paul run for mayor of Vancouver next year.
You know, it's not such a bad idea. Ott had the job. Volrich will never be re-elected, in my humble opinion. Paul looks the part.
Paul looks the part. He's been getting his name in the paper every single day.
Manning for mayor.
Manning for mayor. I can see it now.
That's got it. Now down to serious business. We're in the broadcasting business, and still, Jean Piggott and her merry people have not picked the proper Conservative to head the Canadian Radio and Television Commission. What do you hear?
Well, what I hear, and this sounds like a very serious rumor, that is that Finley McDonald, who set up the Halifax CTV affiliate many, many years ago, then went on to become aide to Robert Stanfield, is in the running. Finley was in town last Friday lunching at the Press Club. He hasn't been in town for quite some time, so that lent credence to the rumor. He's been spending the past few years in Florida, where he operates a small radio station which gives news for Canadians living in Florida. He's got all the right credentials, good broadcasting background, and he's a staunch Tory.
Listen, Finley McDonald's going to come back from the wilds of Florida, it looks like it, to take over the CRTC.
Right.
So it's goodbye to the hopes of Don McDonald, the West Coast broadcaster, who had been earlier in the race touted for this key position.
You mean Don Hamilton?
Don Hamilton. Did
Yes.
I say Don McDonald?
Don Hamilton. I have not heard Don Hamilton's name mentioned in Ottawa at all in that context. I heard it when I was in Vancouver, but I haven't heard it here at all.
Please keep your eye on all disco dancers, all House of Commons wags and wits, or even half that amount if you can find them, and we'll do this again next week.
Okay.
Thanks, Christine.
Bye, Jack.
Bye. Bye. When Ian Waddell was elected NDP MP for Vancouver-Kingsway, not East as I said in my initial slip, he was hardly a political neophyte. The House of Commons is a tough place, even with situations as they are now. My first question, Joe Clark looks good to me at the moment, broadly speaking, dignified, convoluted, but reasonably Looks like a prime minister. How does he look to you?
In the House of Commons, I agree with you, not bad, for about 75% of the time. When he's being straightforward and calm and logical, he looks good. I called him Mackenzie Kingish the other day. He is sort of a Mackenzie King, a little speedier Mackenzie King. That is, you know, very deliberate, chooses his words carefully and so on. But he hasn't made any big decisions yet. You know, what have they done? He keeps, every time we ask him about the oil prices, which is the major thing, you know, those oil prices are going to shoot way up. He said, well, I haven't yet got a decision.
But mind you, look at the opposition he's got. He's got to deal with Lougheed that says we will discuss but not negotiate. He can use his eventual powers, but you must admit that it would be difficult for anybody to negotiate, if possible at all, with Lougheed on the $4 a barrel increase in oil.
Well, we think they agreed to the $4 a barrel increase in oil.
And the rest is all just flim-flam?
But they're getting flack now from Ontario, from Davis, and I think Clark thought he had an agreement at $4 an increase, which is quite a lot and has a lot of serious economic implications. But we think he backed away from it with the thing from Davis, because he's got two Tory premiers and he's got strength in Ontario, Clark has, strength in Alberta, and he's got to get around that somehow.
You're not the NDP energy critic, but does it make sense to you, as it makes to the Liberals and the Tories for sure, that we must increase the price of oil even if it costs the working man an extra $500, $600, $700 a year in gasoline and heating oil, so that the energy can be conserved, or should it be subsidized indefinitely at the lower prices?
Well, I haven't seen any proof that by putting up the cost that people will conserve.
But they'll make money.
They may conserve. I mean, it seems logical that they may conserve, but it's going to affect some of the people you suggested. You know, the lower income people. It's going to take money out of their pockets, and it's going to give more to Alberta, and it's going to give more to the oil companies,
and more to Ottawa,
and more to Ottawa. And then Ottawa's going to cut back on programs. I asked the Prime Minister in the House of Commons on Friday about an excess profits tax. And we've been also taking the position that any money that's taken out of the people's pockets should go back, perhaps, to the pockets of the people that really need it, in subsidies for oil heating and so on. I don't think there's any magic for this world figure, you know.
Isn't he talking about a tax on windfall profits?
He's starting to talk about it. But then now he's going away from what is the definition of the windfall profit, because a lot of the companies, you know, those profit figures, and they're very high for the oil companies, but that's just the tip of an iceberg. A lot of those profits are really much higher, and they're being reinvested into other companies.
Outside this country, perhaps?
Sometimes outside, sometimes here. Dome has bought all that land up in Howe Sound.
Oh, we went through that with the NDP, in case you've forgotten. There was going to be a big oil or coal port out of Britannia under the NDP, but that vanished. That was the time of your no-growth philosophy. Remember, your party had a no-growth philosophy?
I don't remember that we had a no-growth
philosophy. You don't
philosophy.
remember that?
That sounds like Governor Jerry Brown or something.
A good thing that Clark has done?
He's brought in that Freedom of Information Act. That's the only thing he's done. I thought the other politically, before I talk about the Freedom of Information Act, the only other politically really popular thing, I think, I disagree with it, but that mortgage interest deductibility, you know, we were going to get some money back on our mortgages and so on, and our local taxes. I think that's been wiped out by these high interest rates. You know, I think that the political impact of that thing.
You're saying that if I have Clark, as I may have Clark on next week, that I can put it to him that he's going to back away from his mortgage interest deductibility plan?
No, you ask him this. He said, I think in Niagara Falls, in Ontario in April, he said, when I get in, people are going to find houses 20% less. It's going to cost them 20% less to get into new houses and so on. In fact, it's costing 30% more.
I get it.
And the reason is because the interest rates. Guys are renewing their mortgages. You know, they were phoning me last week. They say, geez, I have to pay another $150 a month on this mortgage because it's 15%.
The NDP were in power, of course. They'd have a two mortgage. They'd have a split interest rate at the banks. Commerce and whatnot would pay the high one. Mortgages would be artificially lowered, you would tell me, to 9%.
Well, at a percent that people could
Not
afford.
practical.
Well, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. We'll have to look into it a little more. But the other thing you were asking me what Clark's done that's good. I think that Freedom of Information Act, I'm the critic on that. I think it's not a bad act. It's got some weaknesses. There are a number of things in it, but it's not bad.
Is there a great clamour for that by individuals? There is by the media, by press, by reporters. But is there by individuals a great clamour? I want to see the file on me that the RCMP have on this or that, or I want to see my personal documents at the income tax. The income tax would not be included, would it?
Your own personal income tax or other people's income tax?
My own.
Oh, yeah, you could get your own income tax information. I don't
And all their correspondence and all their thoughts on my income tax.
Well, it depends. If they were thinking of prosecuting you or something like that, they could stop it. But anyway, the question, why? You know, is there a public outcry? I don't think it's a big popular issue. It is a kind of elitist, journalists, public interest groups and so on. But it's still important because it's important that government be open and there not be secrecy in government.
Is Ian Waddell doing a job or not? I don't know, but next 2 segments, while I talk to him, you can phone him if you wish. You don't mind taking phone calls, do you?
No. As long as Senator Lawson doesn't phone me again.
I remember the last time. Did you stack the call? Did you tell people to phone in this morning?
No, I didn't.
Praiseworthy calls?
I didn't.
No dirty tricks?
No dirty tricks.
Raise your right hand.
I operate in Ottawa, not in British Columbia.
After the break. Sometimes I feel I flog dead horses, and I know I do. But this is not quite a dead horse, about which Mr. Ian Waddell asked in the House of Commons. The sealing of the files in the Body House case involving Wendy King, in which a former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court apparently was involved in some way. You asked a question. What was the question?
Well, I raised it wasn't a question, it was to raise a debate under a matter of urgent and pressing necessity in the House of Commons. And I raised the question of the Wendy King affair because we had just had her plead guilty to keeping a common body house. And what I said in the House was, considering that, you know, we're talking about the highest echelons of the judiciary, and considering that, you know, the law has got to be the same for everyone, not different for people in high places or established places. And I thought that's a fundamental principle, and there are a lot of things that concern me about this case. It doesn't smell right. There's a lot of problems.
You're a nosy Parker. You're trying to look under a dirty carpet looking for unnecessary muck, and people should not be interested in this kind of thing at all. The matter has been dealt with by the courts and should be buried.
The matter was never dealt with by the courts. The judge in question resigned, and the Judicial Council of Canada, which is supposed to investigate these kind of things, said, well, we don't have any jurisdiction. We can't investigate. Now, it seems to me that procedure at the minimum has got to be changed. Okay, the second thing is the Minister of Justice was asked, at that time I think it was Otto Lang or Mark Lalonde, to have an investigation. He said no. I wrote to the new minister, Jack Flynn, and I've asked him, why don't you have a prominent lawyer from outside British Columbia, someone like Arthur Maloney, a QC, to look into this, to look in to see whether there was what was on those tapes. The files have been frozen. No one can look into it. I don't know the precedent for that in British Columbia.
I mean, legally speaking, I've never, court-wise, I've never seen it done before. When it's in the court, it's there. It's public.
Well, it was, and there's also a public misconception here that the trial judge had a chance to look at, Judge Jones, I gather, had a chance to look at all this stuff and say that there was no problem, no miscarriage of justice. Well, that's not true at all. I'm not even sure he did look at the thing. In my experience, when there's a guilty plea, I was both a prosecutor and defense lawyer for 10 years. You know, the judge doesn't see anything.
The real danger is that I can say right now, without fear of being sued or attacked by anyone, we don't know who else in the highest level of society was involved in this, and we, the public, are entitled to judge the morality and ethics of any publicly appointed person, if there is such a person, in the unidentified materials in front of the court.
Well, we're told there isn't, and
Who tells us?
Well, we're told by a prosecutor in Vancouver. That's basically it.
With all due respect.
Well, I agree. I don't think it's good enough.
You won't win on this, will you? Flynn will just he brushed you off on the. You didn't get unanimous consent.
I didn't get unanimous consent, but I haven't received a reply from Flynn. I'm not sure he's going to brush me off, because I think it's in everybody's interest, including people that were involved in the matter, to have it looked into. I'm not attacking anybody specifically. I wasn't asking that the books be released holus bolus to hurt people, perhaps innocently. But I think that someone who we can trust, who's outside of the system, can look at the thing and see that justice wasn't subverted. That's really important, Jack.
I've one serious amendment to make to your proper disposition, an outside lawyer being appointed to investigate the matter clinically, you might say. I would suggest someone other than a member of the legal profession. In view of the legal profession's pathetic performance at the time of the original crisis, when nobody, except a couple of MPs, would Leggett and John Fraser would stand up and be counted.
Well,
good point?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's difficult for them to stand up and so on at the time. I don't know. I'd want to think about whether we should have someone from outside the profession. What
kind of reaction have you had from people about the interest rates, apart from the mortgages?
I get a big reaction. I was in Kelowna in the Okanagan, and it really hurts the small businessman, and you know, people trying to borrow money for their business and so on. You know, we're going to be in a double-digit inflation, I think, in the new year. And it's really starting.
Something today.
It's 9 now, but it's going to go above that, and I think a lot of people are going to hurt as a result.
Going to take some phone calls.
Okay.
To Ian Waddell. Go ahead to Mr. Waddell.
Good morning, Mr. Waddell.
Good morning.
This way, Ian. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I want to say to you, sir, as a Canadian and a lover of freedom and democracy, that I don't like dirty tricks either. And I want to say to you as a working man that there's no dirty... You NDP claim to be the champions of the working man. So here's a working man talking back at you. I don't think there's anything lower in dirty tricks than your vain attempt to smear or dirty the provincial government at a federal level by introducing such smut into trying to debate it into the House of Commons. And sir, I can promise you, I for one, for as long as I live and breathe, will always have my arm raised and my fist clenched tight to blacken the eye of world socialism.
Well, I don't understand. What smut am I raising in the House of Commons?
The Wendy King case.
King affair, what else, you idiot?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I don't think there's much percentage.
He and I don't agree, obviously. Yeah.
Likely won't vote for you.
No.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'd like to talk to Mr. Waddell.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Waddell, on this question of the high interest, it was on the radio yesterday that when some mortgages come up or whatever the case might be, some rent around here in Vancouver alone will go up as much as $150 a month. If that does happen and the interest rate should drop down, will we still have to pay that rent of the extra 150 or whatever it might be, and they take in the profit, or what's happening? I mean, this is going to, it's really cutting down at 150. It can go as high as 150. This is what
just one moment, sir. Purely by coincidence, happenstance, and good planning, I have in the studio after Mr. Waddell this morning, Jim Patterson, the Rentalsman, and he's got an interesting answer to that. Mind you, but apart from that, certain rents are decontrolled in this province.
Yeah.
And the vacancy rate we'll find this morning in Vancouver particularly is extraordinarily low. So there will be considerable pressure for the rents to go up on the decontrolled ones.
Yeah, that's right. That's an interesting question, and perhaps Mr. Patterson I'd be interested to hear his answer. I gather the questioner saying, well, look, I've been talking about interest rates going up for people that have mortgages, that have to renew them and have to pay them. I gather he's talking about rents, people that have mortgages and they rent out their houses. Landlords have got increased costs, and I gather he was talking about rents going up as well.
Yeah, it's a very valid point indeed.
Yeah. It's an interesting point.
We'll keep watching the program.
I don't know of any rents. My rent has never come down. It's always gone up in the years that,
what
that I
they
used
say,
to rent.
according to this, if it does go up as much as 150, in some cases it could go up more and less, depending on what you're paying and what the score is.
Good, a good call, sir, and we'll follow it up later in the program. And I'll be back for one more segment with Ian Waddell after this break.
Well, okay. No, I don't mind talking about it.
Personal question to Ian Waddell. Where do you live in Ottawa?
Well, I'm living in a house. I rent a room in a house.
You're the lodger.
A lodger. It's very difficult, you know. You've got to keep 2 residences up, one at home and one in Ottawa. It's very difficult for a West Coast MP to make a real impact in Ottawa.
How much do you pay for that room?
About $200.
And then you eat a la Stanley Knowles.
Yeah, with Stanley Knowles.
In the house. Your subsidized meals in the parliamentary...
That's right, they're sure subsidized. I'll tell you, it's sort of, my assistant and I we worked very hard the other night on this freedom of information. We went for a steak. We were going to treat ourselves. $5.50 for 2 of us. Now that's...
we bought it for you.
Yeah, that's right. I thought, this is amazing, but it doesn't give MPs a very good feeling of what food prices are like when you
You have breakfast, lunch, and dinner there.
Well, I'm trying to get out of there a little bit. Do a little
Otherwise, you begin to look like Stanley Knowles.
That's right.
Not being unkind, but he has a certain reputation.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Waddell.
Yes?
I feel that it's discrimination against renters, this mortgage
Deductibility.
yeah, because they're paying for it, they're being discriminated against, and it's going to be very, very tough also on the people that have got the older homes.
Well, that's right. The plan's changed a little bit, Clark's plan. I mean, the original plan was it would just be deducted from, you know, people who were paying high mortgages, and those people would benefit. And people like a lot of people in my riding, older folk, who have got their houses paid off, you know, it wouldn't help them at all because they're not paying a mortgage payment. But now they're going to get a break in taxes, and that's a little bit better. They can deduct some
let's
of their
face it, it's a Conservative government that has brought in some assistance, or might bring some assistance for a segment of this support important in the middle class.
Yeah, but as far as, another thing, as far as the oil, I don't believe that Canadian oil should be raised up to world levels for Canadians. Let them raise the price up to exports.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead from Oliver.
Yes, I'm telephoning about the new UIC Benefit Act, where if you make over $24,000 a year, you cannot claim. You cannot receive unemployment benefits.
Is that a fact or a plan?
No, it's going in. It's in the stages of going into Parliament.
I think it's part of the new, there was a new bill, C-14, that the Liberals brought up. The Tories say they were against it, and then when they got in, they implemented it. I'm not familiar that much with that particular provision. Some provisions concern us in the NDP, the parts that hurt women and young people. But you know, that whole UIC really has to be looked at again.
I shed no tears for fishermen who made fortunes on herring last summer, and some of them now complaining they might not be able to draw unemployment insurance.
We're not fishermen.
No, I realize that.
Talk to a cannery worker up in, or a packer, as I have, up in the Okanagan, and you can see some of their concern. You know, they get laid off after so many weeks because so they won't have to they won't qualify now.
From
Victoria.
Victoria, go ahead, please.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Just two questions to you with regard to energy. The first one is, what part of the energy crisis do you think is due to the foreign ownership of petroleum resources in this country? And the second is, do you think that the crunch for Joe Clark will come if he decides to disseminate Petro-Canada?
Well, good question. Part of the problem we got with our high interest rates is, and that's, you know, you've asked about foreign ownership, and we're losing $7 billion a year in interest and dividend payments, foreign investments in Canada that are paid out. And so part of the reason we have to follow the American high interest rates is in order that we can continue to attract money, we're told, into the country, investment into the country. We have said, just like we have said, that what we should do is that we should get some control of our own industries by Canadians, and then that money wouldn't flow out of the country. That's especially true with the oil industry, because no country in the world like Canada would allow foreigners to control its oil industry. And that's where Clark is making a mistake, in my view, on Petro-Canada. Petro-Canada was a way for us to get a window on the oil industry and to move to some Canadian control. Now, I don't care if you want socialist control or you want other kinds of control, but we should have control of our own oil industry. And I think Clark could very well flounder on Petro-Canada.
Good. Go ahead, please.
Yes, gentlemen, on the oil, I don't know whether you saw the broadcast last night at 11 o'clock on the news, but they were giving some staggering ratios on the oil in Alberta. 9 out of $10 going to the different companies in the States, and they were quoting figures, millions in some weeks. And I mean, if Lougheed's doing this for his province, his own province is going broke because of what he's letting go out to the States, and the Canadian people are paying for it. It's time the Canadian people woke up and asked for where all these dollars are going. He's fighting so hard because his own province hasn't got any money left in the oil. It's all going out of Canada.
You accept that?
To
I accept part of it. That Canadians should wake up and realize that a lot of the profit from the oil is not going to them, and it all should go to us.
But 9 out of $10, $1 staying in Canada.
But, ma'am, you can't say Alberta's broke by any manner of means. They've got a heritage fund that's bulging at the seams. Billions. 1.4 billion, I think it is.
Well, the figures that were given out on that news broadcast last night were just staggering.
I'll try and have a look at it, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to agree with Waddell on Wendy King, and I think the dirty trick should go right to the end, and I think we should keep Petro-Canada.
Thank you, ma'am. No need for a response. You found a friend. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yes, on the Wendy King situation again, I noted in the paper of the province on Thursday, November the 15th, the courthouse, the old courthouse, that is, that they want to make into a museum, is closed, and there is one statue in there. It stands as justice. And in this case of Wendy King, justice has not been done. And if they want a museum, take the statue out of the old courthouse, put it in the new courthouse, and let's start all over again. Because there is no justice, as far as I'm concerned, in this case.
That's right. You know that statue is in the old courthouse.
They've lost the sod. They've lost the sod. They've got the scales put away, but she is still blinded with the doohickey.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point.
Just
let me say this about the Wendy King case. We don't know whether there, and this is the bad point about it, we don't know whether there's been an injustice. Maybe there hasn't been any injustice. Indeed, I hope there hasn't been any. But given the idea, what concerns me, given the idea that heroin's involved, prostitution's involved, and the idea that that court, the BC Court of Appeal, has to decide cases like the Penthouse case, cases that are really important, and people going to jail for 20 years, syndicates, and all the worst part of our beautiful coast. It's very dangerous to kind of let this thing float like this.
The grave danger is that it besmirches the administration of justice, which the Lord knows was besmirched enough in the lower courts themselves last year.
That's right. But remember when we had the inquiry in Judge Bentrow's case? I mean, everything was out in the open.
It was not.
Well, I think some of it was. I mean, it was better than this.
Some of it was out.
And you know, at least that particular judge had to face that.
No, I'll grant you, there was a form of judicial inquiry. To my mind, it wasn't satisfactory, but there was at least the machinery to have a full-scale inquiry in public. Whereas in this other case, zilch.
Nothing. I wrote to Gardy Gardam. Hello?
Yeah?
Why did you waste your time?
Well, he answered.
Oh, he did?
There is going to be no further inquiry into the case. And they say there was a piece in the paper that said, dead in one province, but alive in
Ottawa.
Ottawa, right. Maybe justice is dead here, but maybe it's still alive on the federal level. And perhaps there could be something done about our judicial system here. Because if justice is dead, which I was writing a poem to keep justice alive, if justice is dead, let's give her a decent funeral, and let's start sending donations to the Cancer Society, because that is where justice has gone.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a good little peroration from the woman. Yeah, my thanks to Ian Waddell, NDP MP for Vancouver East. See you again.
Kingsway.
Why do I have a block about this? Why?
It's all right. Doesn't matter.
Well, Simmer Holt, forgive me, though. That's the point. My thanks to Ian Waddell of Vancouver-Kingsway. Next, Jim Patterson, Rentalsman for British Columbia. Jim Patterson is the Rentalsman for British Columbia. And by curious coincidence, there was a story yesterday which has, as you heard from the earlier calls, got people terribly worried that next year sometime, rents in Vancouver, in the West End, I think it said, would go up $100 or more. Can you give me any of the background to what happened, Jim?
Well, yes, that was an incorrect story in that rent controls are not being removed for next year. It was originally out of the Vancouver City Planning, where someone made a comment that that's what rents would go up if they were removed.
Oh, so it's not likely to happen, is it, at all?
No.
Let me look, but mind you, there will be pressure. Let's take this in a logical fashion. What is the vacancy rate, if you can tell me, for rental accommodation in all or any parts of British Columbia?
It's 0.2% in Vancouver and 0.1 in Victoria.
That's the tightest I've heard about it in years.
Yes.
That means that only 0.2% of all the rental accommodation of which you're aware, the real estate figures, is vacant.
Mm-hmm.
And 0.1% in Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore there's going to be considerable pressure without anything happening on certain suites.
Yep.
Now, what about the controls? Perhaps you could explain to me what controls are now on, because I know they've been brought down from the original regulations.
Right. Yeah, one-bedroom suites renting for more than $300 a month are exempt. Two bedrooms renting for more than $350, and all others renting for more than $400 a month. There's an appeal to the tenants, though, if the rent is under $500. So if they're in the range, let's say, of a one-bedroom between $300 and $500, then they can come to us and we can hear an appeal.
Let me get that straight. One-bedroom suite of less than $300 a month is under control.
Right.
Will it eventually come out of control by the annual increase?
Well, there's been talk from the government originally of phasing out of rent controls, and the original plan was to phase out as the market permitted, that is, as long as the market would allow it. And so far, it has worked fine because there's been sufficient vacancies that the market wouldn't bear large increases, and those groups have not received excessive rent increases. But I think the government will be reassessing that in light of a very tight rental market.
Okay, one bedroom, 300, less than 300 in an apartment is controlled. Two bedroom, less than 350 is controlled. A house of less than 400 is controlled.
Yes.
But if you're in the rental range of between 300 and 500, is it?
Mm-hmm. Right.
You can appeal the increase.
Yes. If you get an excessive rent increase, if you get a 40 or 50% rent increase, or a landlord was attempting to evict via a rent increase, then we could review it. So the only ones with no appeal are units over 500 or new units, units that were first rented after January 1 of 1974 is the other big group.
They're absolutely without control.
Yes.
There was another point I wanted to make. Oh, there are some other ones which are exempted from a duplex.
Owner-occupied duplex.
If I live in one half of the duplex which I own, I can charge the earth in the other half of the duplex.
Yes, they're not usually a problem. People living that close together are generally reasonable.
Talking about people being reasonable, we don't hear nearly so much about your operation as we used to. Does this mean that everything is quiet and calm, or have the amounts of complaints just withered away?
Well, the amount of complaints is going up dramatically. I think the reason that probably you would not be hearing is they're coming to us, but we're certainly getting them. The increases are just astronomical. Our complaint load has been growing at the rate of 5% per month. We're getting in excess of 20,000 calls per month now.
From all over the province?
Mm-hmm. And the only reason we don't get more than 20,000 is our switchboard won't take anymore. It's just absolutely peaked out. Last month, October over September, all of the calls related to rent increases doubled in 1 month. So we've been experiencing a 5% rent increase, or increase in disputes, which then turned into 100% in 1 month.
That's incredible. Why is that? Why the sudden doubling?
Well, the tighter rental market. The rental market tightened very quickly, and the higher interest rates are meaning that there is not much in sight to restore the rental market. There is very little new construction on the line, and there are virtually no new applications, so they're coming to us.
I can see this as a fairly major development, a fairly major crisis. Coming with the 15 or 16 or 17% building mortgage interest, and what do you call that, bridge money might be at 20 or 25% to build a small apartment block, so there is no way in the foreseeable short future whereby the pressure on this incredibly tight vacancy rate is going to slacken.
No, not certainly over the next year, because there's quite a long lead time on new housing. So at the moment, it appears that there will be a tight rental market, that tenants will be affected in a couple of ways. One is that it's difficult to get a new accommodation, but also the higher interest rates will be reflected in rents. In both the units that are exempt from the 7% limit can take them automatically, but even those that are controlled, even the units that are subject to rent controls and have a 7% limit, the landlord can come and apply to our office and say, my interest rates have gone up $75 a month, and that's a valid application. And we may, upon application, after talking to the tenant, grant such an increase.
Above the statutory allowed amount, which is, you say, 7%.
Right. So even for those that are renting now at $250 a month, they can come to us, and if they say, well, my mortgage is up $75 a month, then we will give them $325 a month. And there will be more of those as time goes.
And that will bring them out of controls, except for that basic appeal if it becomes excessive sometime before it reaches 500.
Yes. Yes. So
if costs keep going up, you'll almost decontrol yourselves unless the levels are changed.
Right. The levels could be changed if there's a tight market. But the problem is that the higher interest rates have got to be reflected in higher rents, because to do otherwise means you're going to start bankrupting people, which gives you a tighter market.
As well as being rentalsman, therefore, you must also be the rental review commissioner.
Yes.
Didn't we have two at one time?
Well, we were separate previously, and I was on the Rent Review Commission and the general manager of the Rent Review Commission. When Barry Clark resigned as rentalsman and I was appointed rentalsman, the minister asked me to merge the two offices. So we're in the process of bringing them under one umbrella.
Just to recap, therefore, with the higher mortgage interest rates, the incredibly tight vacancy rate of 0.2 and 0.1 in Vancouver and Victoria, when you take a rental review from a landlord and he comes to you and says, look, I just remortgaged, the mortgage applicable to that suite has gone up, say, $50 a month. Do you examine his books or do you take his word for it?
No, we'll examine it. We'll have a look at the mortgage and do some form of an audit to make sure that there's not abuse.
But you're bound, are you, to give him that increase if he can show you he's going to go broke?
Well, we're not bound, but we do it by policy. It's really, I guess, my own policy, because it's virtually a no-win situation. You either have to allow some very large increases, or you take a policy by which you say no, which means that the return for the landlord is going to go down, which means some landlords are going to go out of business because they'll refinance and they won't have the rents to pay for it.
Before I go to the phones, if I come to you with a complaint about, what kind of complaints do you get apart from the rent increase complaints?
Well, security deposits are a large portion. Eviction, and eviction's the big one. I mean, that's the one that people are really concerned about. Security deposits is an issue where one's landlord is keeping $100 more than they think, and it's that
You have to send a guy to go look at it and test it and judge it.
Sometimes. Sometimes people bring in evidence. They bring in the door that's been kicked down and
Jim,
whatever.
I haven't done this kind of program for a long while, but we're back in business again. With security deposits, drunken tenants, horrible landlords, great willful damage, complaints from neighbours, excessive rent increases. And if I come to you with a complaint, how long will it be before you deal with my complaint?
Okay, the moment the service level is bad, it is poor. So it depends because of the great growth, and bureaucracies are normally not good at reacting to that kind of a change in demand. So we have asked for new people, and we have proposed new legislation that'll simplify a lot of the procedures and cut some of the red tape.
But in the meantime, I won't give that quick service.
Not unless it's an emergency.
But we'll give you quick service and telephone calls to Jim Patterson, the rentalsman, immediately after this commercial. Jim Patterson is the combination rentalsman and rental review commissioner. Correct, Jim?
Yes.
Do try and keep your calls fairly to the point and quite specific. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Patterson?
Yes.
I've got a house rented out in Vancouver, and I've had tenants in it for 3 years now. I have never increased the rent, although the taxes have gone up. But my mortgage is up for review. They've been there about 3 years. And I hate like hell to put it up, you know, because they've been such good tenants, but I don't know, how would I stand?
Well, you could make an application to us. We would consider, if you wanted to increase it more than 7%, and we would consider the fact that you had not increased the rent for a number of years, so you could at least catch up if you wanted to. You could submit the increased costs that you've experienced, both your financing and any other costs, and we'll take that into account. Or if you want to give the tenants a break, you can do something like increase it somewhat this year and maybe the balance in another year, or wait until the tenants move and then apply to put it up for new tenants. So you've got a few options. What we won't do is we will ensure that you're not penalized for giving someone a break.
No, this is. I don't want to up the rent if I don't have to. They're such good tenants. I mean, looking after the place. They're really clean.
Well, don't up
You're
it.
lucky.
No, but it's a question, not a question of don't up it, Jack. It's a question of right now I'm running the red on it. I don't want to make money off it.
Well, what about 7%? Would that take you off the hook?
I think it would, yeah.
Well, he's entitled. What's the rent you charge?
3.5
For what?
for a 3-bedroom house.
Where? What part of town?
East End.
Well, that's fairly low rent.
He could give them 7% on the anniversary date. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Which, if you haven't increased it, you can increase it any time. But it's up to you. I mean, you have to make the decision, of course.
Yeah, I don't like to lose my tenant.
$350 a month is a pretty good rent for a house.
And the
That's
$25 increase is what 7% would be.
Okay, sir.
Right, thank you. Hope the tenants aren't listening. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Patterson, I'd like to know what investigative involvement, if any, your office has had with rental agencies such as Rentex or Home Locators, and what conclusions you've reached.
Well, we get a fair number of calls regarding them. We don't personally investigate rental agencies.
I see.
There's been some complaints, certainly, but...
I see. I consider the agencies parasitic, you know, considering the shape of the market right now, but I suppose everything is legitimate, eh?
Well, there's nothing illegal about what they're doing. It's really a question of being very careful. They have, or at least we've received a lot of complaints of them advertising lead-ons, places for rent, and you get down there and they really are rented. But if you think about it, I mean, that should make sense. They're obviously going to advertise their best suites, and in a tight market, you don't have to think about it very long before you're going to realize that those are going to get rented quickly.
How do they get the money, caller? What, do they charge a flat fee?
Yes.
Yes, they do. They give you something like a 3-month ticket to their files for a fee of approximately $50.
That's right.
I'm not sure what the fee is now.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, sir?
Yeah, I've got a 11 days notice for termination notice from my landlord.
You've got a termination notice from your landlord.
And I pay my rent, and I don't know the reason why they give me 11 days to move out from an apartment.
They give you 11 days?
Yeah, notice.
Okay, it sounds like you've got a notice for rent arrears, which should be 13 days, not 11. But if you have a notice to move out because you're in rent arrears, you have 5 days to either pay the rent or to contact our office and dispute it. But if you've paid the rent, then the notice will not take effect. But if you want to make sure, you should phone our office.
Well, I pay my rent, so I figured I should just ignore it or bring it down to...
Yeah, I would contact us just to make sure.
What is your number, by the way?
689-0811.
689-0811. Do you welcome callers to your office, or would you rather they telephone?
No, or you can come down.
Where is it?
525 Seymour Street.
And what about out of town? Can they call you collect?
No, there's an office in Victoria, and there's an office in Cranbrook, and there's an office in Kamloops, and we're opening one in Prince George and Kelowna, but they're not yet set up.
Thank you, sir. 689-0811. Williams Lake, go ahead, please.
Mr. Patterson.
Yes.
If you have a complaint of a 23.4% increase, and that's dealt with, do you check into the books to see if there's any other misdemeanors in that certain building, in the complex?
Normally, there's no specific rule on that. If we have reason to believe that a landlord is putting up the rest of the building illegally, then yes, we have powers of subpoena if necessary.
I'm getting my money back. Charged me $55 a month over the previous tenant, and I went through this, whatever his name is, from the Rent Review Commission, and I told him I could give him all kinds of names of people here that have been gouged, but he says they have to complain personally, and I think they're scared of being evicted.
Okay, well, as I said, it depends. Our problem is that we are so overloaded with complaints that to start on our own generating and saying to people, are you sure you wouldn't like to complain, would just mean that we can't get to the people that are calling us. So we have to use some discretion. We can't go on witch hunts ourselves. We just don't have the staff.
Our landlady is of the opinion that she doesn't have to pay interest on that $100 damage deposit. Is she right?
No, she has to pay interest.
She just told that to my neighbor here yesterday. One more question.
Okay.
How much interest?
8%.
8%. Go on.
Okay. What about the rent increase forms? Nobody in this building has ever had one that I know of.
Well, they're supposed to be using them, and the rents can be rolled back.
As people move out, the rents go up $50 and $60 a month, and there are no forms ever been signed by anybody.
Well, your landlord is taking a big risk, which you should...
She's just the manager. The owners live in Vancouver.
Well, then the owners and or the managers are taking a big risk. I hope they're listening, because while they may get away with it for some period of time, if they're ever caught up with at some stage where there's 5 years after they increase the rent illegally, they may have to pay it back. And we're making awards of several $1,000s per suite. And in some cases, because the rent went up illegally in 1974. So
you nail them for it.
Yes, they've been charging $100 a month ever since 1974.
People to write in and complain, but they are scared.
Well, they should all have the same amount of guts that you have.
Well, I know, I tell them that.
There is unity and strength, ma'am. Get them all to write in. You go around and get them to write.
I'm going to.
Good girl.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Kamloops.
Hello.
Go ahead from Kamloops.
Mr. Webster.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Rentalsman, will this new rate have anything to do with the Rentalman's Act that's in force right now?
Which new rate? The interest rate?
Well, you have a Rentalman's Act that is in force right now.
Yes.
How is that going to affect that new act? Will that be changed?
Which rate? Are you talking about interest rates?
Well, it'll be. Well, they have an interest rate, yes. And
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
In the act.
So no, there's a 7% statutory maximum limit unless otherwise justified in the rent increases.
Right.
You've no plans to change that?
No, not at the time being.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Hello. I was told that in Vancouver there's a moratorium on illegal suites at the present time because of the low rental vacancy. And I was wondering how there could be a moratorium like in Vancouver and not in other municipalities. That puts the people in the other municipalities out in the street.
Okay, the enforcement, the reason is that the enforcement of illegal suites is under municipal jurisdiction. So some municipalities may choose to enforce them while others may not. I would hope that the municipalities are reviewing policies of closing down illegal suites, given the very tight vacancy rates.
What are the qualifications for illegal suites? I live in one, and it's the nicest place I've ever lived in. There are a row of them, a row of 10.
Okay, but the qualifications, it depends on the municipality. It's usually a zoning problem, where it's zoned single family and there's more than one unit on the lot. That's the common problem.
It's zoned duplexes, only when it was built, they were built as fourplexes. So there are 4 families in each one of these duplexes.
Ma'am, question from me is, which municipality are we talking about?
Burnaby.
Where?
Burnaby.
Are they prosecuting the owners of the illegal suites?
My landlord.
They're prosecuting him?
At this present time.
How many suites, how many families are involved?
Well, there's the people next door. They don't even know our name on this side yet.
And you're saying they're liable to be 10 families out in the cold?
That's what I'm saying. They're using this one to start with. They've never even been inside this place. Never even been inside.
Okay, that's an interesting point, and your thought on that is what?
Okay, one of the problems with Burnaby, and there was a news item on just the other day on this, in which one of the council members was saying that they could enforce the closing down of illegal suites now that there is no rental shortage. And I just about fell off my chair when I was hearing this in the news, because I don't know where this person was getting their information that there's an abundance of vacancies in Burnaby, but it's near zero, so I hope that the council is.
Oh, when you say Vancouver, you mean the
Greater Vancouver.
Greater Vancouver. It's almost zero in Burnaby as well.
Yes.
I think you should take the matter up forthwith with Constable, Tom Constable.
And they come along and say to us that we have to leave, go out in the street where there is no place to live. I have 2 children.
Well, it's up to the municipality. They have to give you, the owner has to give you a 30-day termination notice, but if the municipality closes the suite down, they have that right. There's no question that that's within their jurisdiction. So what you want to do, as Jack is saying, is go to the municipality and attempt to put some pressure on them to not close them.
To be quite non-partisan, I would go to the next meeting where Constable and Mercier are appearing and pin them to the wall on the question, will you or will you not tell the building inspector to back off? Okay?
Okay.
Do it in a loud voice. Tell him Webster sent you.
Thanks.
After the break. Jim Patterson, the Rentalsman for British Columbia, has brought us a lot of new and good information this morning. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Patterson.
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Patterson.
Yes, speak up, sir.
Good morning. Well, here's my story. A good friend of mine was renting a home recently, and, well, I guess the owners had sold the home.
Do speak up just a little, will you?
Okay, I will. The owners had sold the home with possession date being on November the 1st, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And he was given 1 month's notice to leave the home. Could you please tell me the law as it relates to this?
Sure. That is not, as it sounds, a valid notice. Therefore, that person should contact our office. And that what the law says is if someone wants to take occupancy, there's a 2-month notice period. And if it's a new owner, they must have legal title to the property before they can give the notice. So if they have a November 1 possession date, then that's when they can give the notice for 2 months. So it appears, just on what you're saying, that that is not a valid notice. You can't terminate just to sell a house on a 1-month notice.
You can terminate to sell a house on a 2-month notice.
If the new owner wants to move in.
But supposing I just want to sell a house, how much notice do I give?
Okay, if you wanted to have a vacant house.
Vacant house for sale.
Then you must give 4 months' notice, plus pay $300 of the moving expenses.
All right, that's a vacant house. If I sell the house while the tenant's in, how much notice?
You must wait till a new owner gets possession, then he can give 2 months' notice.
Your friend, on the face of it, did not get the proper notice and should contact the Rentalsman, and we've got the number written down on the screen now, 689-0811, 525 Seymour Street in Vancouver. Not collect, pay your own charges from, why don't you bring that in? Would that cost too much money?
Well, it was quite expensive, and what we've decided to do is open regional offices throughout the province.
Okay, thank you very much, best of luck. Go ahead, please.
Hello, good morning. I'm calling regarding the price of apartments. The Human Resources have put a freeze on money and have taken our money down quite a bit since the 1st of April. After the 1st of April, you cannot pay more than $260 a month for a house or an apartment.
Now, ma'am, just let me get that clear. We, being people on human, what do you call that money? On social assistance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they've laid a maximum down of $260 a month for what kind of rental accommodation?
For any type of rental, you're only allowed $260 after April the 1st, and they have taken mine down $140. I get $230 for maintenance for my son and myself, a teenage son, and $260 for rent, and it's very, very hard to find.
What was your rental rate from Human Resources?
I was paying $350.
And were they paying the whole shot?
Not quite. They were paying about $310.
And they've knocked it down to $260.
Yeah, after April.
Is that in your bailiwick at all?
No, not directly. The only way that we can influence it is to provide the government with the information. It's see, the situation is rents normally and historically for decades have gone up less than wages, less than the CPI. The average rent increase in this province for the last number of years has been running around 4.5% or 5%. And there is a general misunderstanding that rents are just the roof's going off them. In the aggregate, on the arithmetic average, they're going up at a very reasonable rate. The problem is that people on receiving assistance, and especially people on fixed income, the distribution of wages is also increasing. And during these times of high inflation, those people are in very difficult positions.
I want to grind a little axe here. When did this cut come in your rental allowance?
It came on April the 1st, and I saw Amazing Grace on your program saying how everything was going to be rosy.
Yeah, that's what she told us.
I'd like to get on there and speak with her.
Maybe we should have the Amazing Gracie back on again about it.
And they've cut my rental off completely because I couldn't pay the amount that I couldn't pay it at all. So they've just given me $230 for this month for my son and myself, and they told me to do the best I can with it.
Have you contacted an MLA?
Well, I have.
Which one?
Ernie Hall.
Hall should be able to wield some clout for you.
Said there's nothing to do about it, and so I asked them to place my son in a home. That's why people have to break up their homes.
How old is your son?
He's 17, and he's an honor student. And
you don't want him in a home.
Well, I can't stay here and starve to death and freeze to death.
Ernie Hall might have given me a call about it.
Pardon?
Ernie Hall might have given me a call about it and put the media.
Well, I spoke to Brian, and Brian told me to go see Ernie
my Brian?
Yes.
That was the right thing for my Brian to do, but if Ernie couldn't handle it, he should have brought it back to us.
Well, it was until yesterday I've gone up to see them and tried to talk to Ernie Hall yesterday and his secretary. She was quite helpful, but didn't seem to be able to get through.
I know it. I mean, I'm not knocking Ernie Hall once they set down regulations, but I think we might have a look at what's happened to the rental accommodation allowances for people like yourself. Leave your number with Linda, will you, please?
Yes, thank you.
Don't go away. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Jim. Is that rule still existing whereby the owner of an apartment block can evict a tenant if the owner or his family wish to move into the suite?
Yes, that's the 2-month notice period.
Okay, now once they move into that suite, they can occupy that suite for, a 6-month period of time to prove legitimate occupancy.
12 months.
12 months? Mm-hmm. And the rent can be repaid, can't it, between the time the old tenant was evicted and the owner's people come in?
Yeah, what happens is if there's abuse, that is if a landlord says they want to move in with their family and just to accomplish an eviction, and the landlord or immediate family does not stay there for 12 months, and it was clear that the reason they didn't stay there is they never intended to, then the landlord can be liable for moving expenses and additional rent paid by the tenant that they wrongfully evicted.
Have you ever used that provision?
Yes.
If he does stay there for 12 months, though, he can go on and do that in other suites of the building and repay the rent every time and really...
You mean move? Oh, no, he's not out of rent controls. So all he's accomplished, he has to live there...
the rent, can't he repay that rent when someone moves out before another person moves in?
Only if he lives there 2 years.
Oh, he must live there 2 years?
Yes.
Okay,
so it's not a very practical way of getting out of rent controls.
Family in for 2 years, and during that period of time, he could have jacked the rent up, what, $600?
Well, if he's living there himself,
yes, but
so
once
he's
he
just
moves
charging
in 2
himself
years,
rent.
the new rent is now $600.
That's right. If he's, that's right.
I'm sorry. It's all the time I can give you. Jim, you've been a veritable mine of information. I'm grateful. Rentalsman for British Columbia, Jim Patterson. Webster after the break. Before I wrap up the program this morning with Linda, I must get something off my chest. When I saw and heard and read the story of Sir Anthony Blunt, I almost flew up. It is an appalling, disgusting denunciation of the British class system. And it brings out in me, I suppose, all of my Clydeside background. When I think of the way ordinary minor spies have been hounded to jail for life, when I think of the way newspaper men and broadcasters in Britain have been hassled and harried under the Official Secrets Act, and now we find that this man, the royal advisor to Buckingham Palace on art, who was exposed in 1964, was given a royal pardon secretly, and his damn title wasn't stripped from him until a broadcaster wrote a book which brought this dreadful creature out into public. Bad enough to have the Burgess and Maclean upper-class spies and the Philbys, one of the worst traitors that the Western world has ever seen. And now we have ex-Sir Anthony Blunt protected and tipped off to walk away. It's almost enough to turn me into a Republican solidly and forthwith. It's just appalling. And they'll pass it off and get away with it. He should do 2 life terms forgive me. Monday.
Monday we have Mayor Burnett from Delta, John Berrigan, the spokesman for the Doukhobor community.
Big week next week too, because we've also got Prime Minister Joe Clark. More details later. 9 a.m. Monday precisely.